Well, welcome. This is so exciting for me because it was about 20 years ago when I believe it was Conwell Recchi came to me and he said, "Hey, will you come speak to just to a couple of my friends and at this conference called TiE?" And I said, "Oh, sure, I'd be happy to do that." And I was expecting, about 3 or 4 of his friends. And I came, and it was a similar ballroom to this, and there were, I think there were 600 or 700 people there, and I ended up walking away with 75 business plans, and it was it was just amazing. I walked away with this huge stack of business plans, and I hope I do the same today. And so TiE has really come a long way, and it has really grown the Indian entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurs from that region, and we are so excited. They've been a great part of our lives and careers. Jay mentioned the Draper University, and we would like to announce that Draper University and TiE have now a relationship where TiE will be working with us in marketing Draper University, in lining up 5 great candidates. Each year we're going to do hopefully scholarships for 5 individuals who come. This is a boarding school. And I think it's going to be a great relationship ongoing. We'll do a lot of our recruiting here, and I'm always thrilled with Indian entrepreneurs, and so I'm looking forward to teaching a few of them. It's going to be a very unusual university. It's a lot more hands-on than it is book learning. This is a very different kind of a place. Maybe we'll have actually some Bollywood dance lessons or something, just kind of keep it fun. So I'll give you a little of the history. My grandfather was the first venture capitalist on the West Coast. He kind of invented the concept of raising money from other groups and putting it into entrepreneurs, he and General Dorio. And then my father was a great venture capitalist, and he was actually the first venture capitalist to go to India and to set up Draper International, which was an enormous success. For those of you who actually invested with Draper International, I think you made about 14 times your money, but you made about 3 times your money before you actually even wrote a check. There were these entrepreneurs during that period that actually got funded and went public within a period that happened even before the fund was raised. So there's been a lot of genetic dilution along the way there, but I also am in the venture capital business, and I've been able to take advantage of all the great pioneering work the 2 of them did, and I've gone and moved through this incredible, extraordinary period where venture capitalists and entrepreneurs built this relationship that was for the best of both of them. But really, the history of venture capital is, the first one that I know of was Queen Isabella in Columbus, where Columbus said the world was round, and no dictator in all of Europe thought that they all thought he was crazy, except Queen Isabella, who I guess was either very charmed or decided that this made a lot of sense, and she made a deal where she said, "Okay, I'll give you 3 boats, and we'll split the profits 50-50." And then Columbus went back to his crew, and he said, "Okay, we've got 50% of the profits after we return the boats, and I'll split those 50-50 with you, the crew." And that's pretty much the way venture capital's worked ever since. So if you want some information on how how the relationship with the entrepreneur and the venture capitalist works by this book. Dad wrote it, and it's really fun, and it's also sort of a great way of thinking about life. And while we're on the subject of my family, watch this show. My daughter is the Valley Girl, and she interviews all these great entrepreneurs. I actually think last year she came to TiE and did some interviewing, and I think she did a little dancing. I'm not quite sure. She's wild and fun, and everything's pink for her. And so go visit the show. She's had some great interviews and done some fun things. And then my son helped me start this business, which is Expert Financial. So this is like my pre-roll. Expert Financial is a company that I think going public, I mean, except Facebook did finally get out, I think going public is possibly a thing of the past. And I think companies should be able to get liquid, raise money, and be tradable without having to go through all those ridiculous, filling out all those ridiculous forms and kowtowing to all those bureaucrats. So Expert Financial allows a company to stay private, raise money, and be tradable. And some of those companies now are lining up to go XPO, which is a new kind of market. And then, of course, come to DFJ to raise capital. Okay, that's the end of my pre-roll. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a history, because I had this great opportunity. I started to see the world in a new way. And it all started with an Indian entrepreneur. He came to our office with his friend, an American engineer, and they came to me and they said, hey, we can do free web-based email. And I said, well, that's great, but then how does that become a business? And they said, oh, we'll just make it up on volume. And I sort of thought, well, okay, how does this work? And I didn't really know, but he was such a persuasive and confident entrepreneur, this was Sabir Bhatia, that we went ahead and gave him some money. And he then came to us within a month or two and said, it's up. And I said, what's up? And he said, well, we've got free web-based email. People anywhere on this internet thing can now have conversations with each other. And I said, well, that's great. How are you going to get the word out? And he said, we're going to go on TV and we're going to put billboards on 101, and then everybody's going to know. And I thought, wait, we gave you, what, $103,000 or something, and you're now going to go do TV ads? I said, that isn't going to work. I said, can't we just get it out to all those people that are on this internet thing? And he said, no, that would be spamming. And then I said, well, look, we're giving this thing away. Maybe you can just put a message at the bottom of everybody's email that says, P.S. I love you, get your free email at Hotmail. And he said, I mean, I could see it in his face. He was saying, of all the investors in the world, why did we end up with this one? And he eventually, I just kept pounding and pounding, and finally he said, okay, we'll do it, but no P.S. I love you. Now, to this day, I believe that if he had kept the P.S. I love you, we would have a much more peaceful and loving world. But what it did for me was it opened up the world, and it made me feel like what used to take 3 business trips and years to build relationships with people in India or other parts of the world could now be just an internet message that went around the world very quickly. And what was really remarkable was Sabir sent one email to his friend in India, and within 3 weeks we had 100,000 registered Hotmail users in India. Now this was 1995, and if you do the Google search, you'll find that there may not have even been 100,000 computers in India at that time. So this was a remarkable thing, and it opened up the world. We are all much more, it's so much more easy to communicate with each other through Hotmail and Skype and a number of other services, and we all have access to the same information. So it made me start thinking that in the venture capital business, I was going to have to be more, I was going to have to be in more places, because entrepreneurs were going to start anywhere. It was an information economy, and we were going to have to be able to fund companies everywhere, and it helped me think about how to build my venture business around the world. So that's my India talk, except there was one other thing that happened. More recently, I went and I visited my partner, Mohanjit Jolly, in India, and he said, "Okay, Tim, are you ready to walk across an Indian street?" And I said, "Oh boy." And you know, there's an elephant coming by, and a camel, and a motorcycle, and a guy with a rickshaw, and 3 cars kind of coming in 4 or 5 different directions. And they were weaving in and out. And I said, "Okay." And I started, and I walked across the street, and people going in both directions around me, and I got halfway across, and I saw an opening, and I sprinted across, and my partner said, "No!" And I said, "What? I made it across." And he goes, "No sudden movements." So what I learned was that in India, everyone is doing partial differential calculus as they cross the street. And that was where it dawned on me, that's why all the great software engineers come from India. So I'll take you to Estonia, because this kind of continues the story. I love this viral marketing thing, and so I thought, wow, I saw a new technology, and I backed Skype. And I had to be in Palo Alto. I was at I have a good friend, Tony Perkins, who was putting on a conference like this, and he said, "Okay, can you be there on this particular day?" And I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And then it was the same, at the same time, Nicholas Zenstrom said, "Our first Skype meeting in Estonia is going to be," and it was on the same day. So I had to figure out, how was I going to be in 2 places at once? And so I went back to Tony and I said, "Tony, can we work something out where, like, I do it by video conference or something?" And at that time, video conference was like this. And so he kind of went, "Oh, well, okay, we'll do it." He was always kind of up for trying new things. And he said, "But can you get that guy Nicholas Zenstrom on the video with you?" And I said, "Sure." At that time, Skype maybe had 3 million users, and they were all audio users. And so I went to Nicholas and I said, "Can you guys set up a video conferencing system in Tallinn, Estonia?" And he said, "Yeah, I think we can do that." And I said, "Well, that's great." And so then we got set up and we were ready to go, and we had a backup telephone. And he said, "Okay, we're ready, throw the switch." And I said, "What switch?" And he said, "Don't worry about it." And so we went, we did our presentation, and we did a little Q&A, and it worked out very, very well. It was very smooth, and I was wondering, Nicholas, how did that happen? And he said, "Well, yeah, we were working on something in the back room. We had kind of this alpha program video conference thing, and I didn't want to scare you, but we used our technology for this." And I said, "Wow, how did you do that? That's amazing." He said, "Well, we shut off about 100,000 telephone calls for an hour so that we could use the bandwidth." And so for those of you who were on Skype calls at that time, I apologize. My trip to China, my first trip to China was with my father. He was with UNDP, and we went about 28 years ago. And I arrived in China, and we went on the only paved road to the only car on the only paved road to the only hotel where I kind of understood how the bathrooms worked. And And we got there and everybody was on their feet or on bicycles, and they were selling fruit to one another, and that was China, that was Beijing, and lots of people. And then I went back about 15 years later, and I was going from Shanghai to Hangzhou, and I was looking out the window, and every building was a 2-story concrete tilt-up. And I was bored. I was just looking for 3 hours, just looking at these concrete tilt-ups. Then all of a sudden I saw one, and it had blue windows and a spire and a little driveway. I thought, wow, that's interesting. I wonder who has that house. And then a block later, another one, blue windows, a spire, and a little driveway. And then about a mile down the road, there were 3 houses, all with blue windows and spires and paved driveways that were all connected. And I thought, wow. First of all, I thought, the blue window salesman is going to make a fortune here. And the second thing I thought was this is going to be just like the Keeping Up with the Joneses. If your neighbor has blue windows, you've got to get blue windows. If your neighbor has a refrigerator, you've got to have a refrigerator. If your neighbor has a cell phone, you've got to have a cell phone. And so it dawned on me that I had to be in China. So I went and I talked to one of the big ministers of finance of China, and I said, now, I'm kind of interested in investing here, but I don't think I'd ever do it. And he said, well, why not? And I said, because there's a friend of mine who built an $80 million chocolate company here, and then you guys just nationalized it. And he said, well, how will we get more investors to China? And I said, well, make sure that people who invest here make money, and then the word will get out, and then everybody else will come in. And so that looks like that actually did happen. But then I said, okay, I'm going to try it. So we made 3 short investments in China into people who said they had good government connections. And we lost all our money in all 3 of those companies. And then I thought, well, what do we really do? Well, we invest in driven, excited, young, dynamic people who really want to change the way the world works. And so then I said, well, let's just try that a couple more times. Let's not give up on this China thing. So we made a few more investments, and those turned out to be Baidu and Kongjong and Focus Media, these enormous, huge public companies. And so our travels were not for naught. Singapore was early in the day, and they helped us a lot with getting started on our international ventures. Of course, Singapore is this little island. They have to be international, and they were very helpful to us. Ukraine was an interesting case. It turns out that in Ukraine, they used social networking, they used instant messaging to overthrow the government. And I got to meet the president of Ukraine, President Yushchenko, who had just overthrown the government. And I said, well, God, why would I ever invest in Ukraine? This is my strategy with world leaders. Why would I ever invest in your country? And he said, well, you must invest here. And I said, well, why? It takes 6 months and 23 bureaucrats before you can even incorporate in this country. And he said, that will be 1 week, 1 bureaucrat. And something dawned on me, and it started with Hotmail. Governments around the world are recognizing that we can all communicate with each other. We can overthrow them. We can do any number of different things. And they now have to compete for us. They have to compete for the businesses and the capital and the entrepreneurs of the world. And so there's this new competitive governance thing that's happening because of companies like Hotmail that have allowed us to all spread the word. And of course, Facebook and Twitter overthrew Egypt and Tunisia. And so now it really looks like bad governments are going to be overthrown, and good governments are going to get better because they're going to have to compete for all of us. Russia, we've had a lot of false starts in Russia, but they had a really difficult time because they had 75 years of Bolshevik rule, and the Bolsheviks believed that business was bad. And so can you imagine going through an entire, if you're an entrepreneur in Russia today, your father, your grandfather's father, and his father all believed that business was bad and should be illegal. And now you have to go out and start a business. There's a big uphill climb there for Russia. Anyway, I mentioned Egypt. Nice picture of a pyramid. And I mentioned the DFJ network. Now, what's happened was, at first, it made sense for us to have this big global network, and it still does. But what's happened now is if you have a new software package, or if you have a new game that goes on a cell phone, or a new app that goes on a iPad or something, and it's really exciting, it will spread around the world very quickly. I believe SocialCam went from 0 to 50 or 60 million users in about 2 or 3 months. That's way faster than Hotmail grew. I think distribution is starting to commoditize. So if you have a good idea, it will spread around the world much faster than ever before. Now, it does one other thing. It makes it so, since technological breakthroughs spread faster, so do ideas, so do competitors. And so if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting a business, it's going to be tough, because when you start your business, there are going to be 50 other people doing the same thing. Now, 3 billion of us are all interconnected, and that'll eventually be 7 billion. That's a lot of creativity in the business world. And if it's a winner-take-all game in any given area, any given business, we have to really think creatively. So Silicon Valley right here is still the central hub, and I actually think this is going to be a great place to be for an entrepreneur for the future, because you're going to see all the things that are happening out there in the world, and you're going to be able to distribute, those things will distribute faster and faster. So this is Moore's Law, and it says that $1,000 worth of compute power doubles every 18 months. And that started to accelerate, and I would argue that it's accelerating because there are more people involved in the global economy. But what that means to me is a new platform that's twice as good as it was before happens every 18, 16, 14 months. If a new platform happens every 14 months, then almost every 14 months, there's going to be a new rash of new creativity and new ideas and new startups that all happen around this platform that takes a leap. So as entrepreneurs, you've got to start thinking that change is happening faster and faster. And so one way to look at this is think of all the things that have happened in the last 150 years, all the inventions, the airplane, the car, the indoor plumbing, the electric light, the search engine, the pill, the bomb, the MRI machine. All of these things have happened in the last 150 years. They've really changed the way we live. Our lives are so much better. And they're going to get better at a faster and faster rate. But as an entrepreneur, that means you've got to be thinking way out. It means you've got to be thinking very creatively. So think about what all the breakthroughs in the next 15 years might look like, because that amount of change that happened in the last 150 years will happen in the next 15 years. So this could be anything. It could be, imagine energy at 1/10 of the cost that you get energy today. Imagine everything that you might see on Star Trek, the holodeck, the genetic disease prediction. You could have a cure for heart disease or malaria or AIDS. You could have, people could be living much longer. You could have something I call a food drop, which is, when I was a little kid, I was always hungry and I was always running around and having fun, and I didn't want to stop to go eat. So I always thought you should have something that's like food, drop, and your food would drop into your hand. There's going to be both security, there are these new security machines that you walk through at the airport where the guy behind the screen sees you completely naked, and there are like all these new applications for that. So the future really looks promising, but that's for 15 years out. What about the 2 years after that? I mean, are we going to discover wormholes, and are we going to do teleportation, and are we going to have Martian colonies? And that's the way entrepreneurs have to start thinking. They have to think way out there, because for you to hit the market and win over a company that's already made it, you've got to be thinking really far out. This is the Draper Wave. I made this up because I thought venture capital and private equity seem to be on a curve that runs counter to each other. And so I thought it was a sine wave, but then I thought, no, it kind of comes up in a rash of craziness, and then it comes crashing down. So if we start with a recession, people are out of work, and they think, I got to create my own job. So then they start businesses, and then they realize that their job is doing quite well, and they need to hire people. And then people recognize that things are going well over there, and they start to invest, and then they hire more people, and then they start investing, and then people are making so much money off of these that you go into this frenzy, and then they call that the bubble. And then the bubble pops and it crashes down, and the private equity guys come in with very rational minds, and they cut teams back, they make things work more efficiently, and then they start doing very well, and then the banks lend to them in crazy ways as they go up their curve, and then at some point somebody says, well, why are we lending to this? And then the market crashes again and we start over. So I think we're like 3 years into this cycle. It's the beginning, Facebook went public yesterday, and things are just starting to pick up. And I think we're in for about 5 or 6 more years that are going to be quite exciting and good. And these are the numbers that basically play that out. Facebook had their IPO, hooray. Way to go, team. That kind of, that gives us a little bit more energy and vibrancy, so that we think, okay, let's go do more angel investing. Let's go start more companies. This still works. This economy still works. And it kind of works as long as we have some liquidity option. And that's where I go back to expert financial. I think we need something that's in between a startup and a public offering, because the public offerings are so far out now. I think we need this expert financial or something like it that allows companies to raise money and investors to get some liquidity along the way. Because if illiquidity really can kill an economy, because people start to lose faith. Faith and hope are really important and powerful forces that we really need here in the Silicon Valley. And so having some stepping stone to a public offering like an XPO, I think, is going to be the future. So what do I look for in an entrepreneur? I look for somebody who can solve problems. Problems are usually not created, but identified by politicians. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to figure out what problem to solve, go listen to a politician speak. They'll say, we got a healthcare problem, or we got a traffic problem, or we got a problem with war, or we got a problem with something else. Well, it turns out entrepreneurs are the ones, it isn't politicians, but it's entrepreneurs are the ones that go and they solve those problems. So you can imagine, what many problems a company like Hotmail ended up solving. Now we also look for iconoclasts, because the post office used to be the post office, and no, it would never change. And all of a sudden, email came along, and boom, the post office had to completely reinvent itself, and it's a whole different thing. Telecommunications, to me, used to be a dial-up phone that was where you were actually tied to a wire to the wall in your house, and sometimes you even had to be on a party line where other people were talking at the same time. And then Skype completely changed that. Trade was completely changed, and we think about trade in such a different way now because of eBay. And my son comes to me, and I go, why aren't you out there playing with your friends? And he didn't come to me. He was sitting at his computer, and I said, why don't you go out and play with your friends? And he said, I am, Dad. They're right here on Facebook. So the neighborhood has changed. And then research, advertising, libraries are all completely obliterated by companies like Google and Baidu. So we look for also these clever business models. And the only way I can describe this is Amazon created a bookstore with no inventory and no accounts receivable. So if you can put zeros somewhere in your income statement and balance sheet, you've got a big opportunity. Now, of course, cash should be a big number and sales should be a big number. But then we also look for black swans. We look for people who are doing things differently in weird ways. And every once in a while, we lose a lot of money on these, but every once in a while we run into black swans that change solar energy, change the way solar energy is delivered, like Solar City, or SpaceX has done something where for 1/10 of the cost of the direct costs and 1/100th of the indirect costs that NASA uses to launch a certain payload into space, these guys can launch a payload into space. So for $30 million, they can launch the same payload that cost NASA $3 billion, which is why NASA is now working with SpaceX to launch their rockets. I'm really excited about the American Jobs Act because it's a great opportunity for all of us to attain better liquidity, and it's great for entrepreneurs, and it's terrific for everybody. But it's one of those things where, you know how we're all these governments are in competition with one another. Well, this is the US, and the US is trying to compete with all the other countries for the entrepreneurs. And the Jobs Act seems to work for that. Now, the politicians have all agreed this is the right thing to do, but we have this bureaucracy that is not moving. And so first you have to convince Congress, but then you have to convince the SEC to do it. And they'll just sit on their hands if they don't like the act. And so if you have some influence here, push the SEC to push this thing through, because the country is a little bit run by the bureaucrats today. It's a little strange. I always thought it really mattered who got into office, and now I'm not so sure, because the bureaucrats look at these guys and they say, well, you'll be here 2 years, 4 years, maybe 8. I'm here forever. I can wait you out. And I'm worried that the SEC might be waiting us out. And now I want to close with something. Remember that entrepreneurs are heroes. They take long odds at extraordinary outcomes. They help create new jobs, build wealth. All our lives get better. The consumer is happy. And so entrepreneurs are such heroes. It just comes from my heart, and I just don't know how to thank them. So then I thought, well, let's sing to them. Hit it. So I want you to help here, because my voice is not very good and really worse in the morning. Invested all his mattress money. Divorced his prom queen, hometown honey.
scraping up his alimony.
Friends think he's a little funny. Needs a world-class CEO. Just another million or so. Get him to some real cash flow, so tears and sweat can IPO. For 15 years, he's been outgunned. Bankers demanding a blood refund. Companies looking moribund. Even Draper will not fund. He is the risk master, lives fast and drives faster, skates on the edge of disaster. He is the risk master. He's got a mission, company vision, an artist's ambition, gut intuition, fearless and free employee. No guarantee for the corporate escapee. Team fights on against the trend. Had to lay off his best friend. Called a recession, seems like depression. Chapter 7, is this the end? But then a salesman shouts, we got it! The company's gonna show a profit. To think the papers rang quixotic. The sky is open, astronautic. He is the risk master. Everybody lives fast and drives faster. Skates on the edge of disaster. He is the risk master. My little Bollywood thing. Master lives fast and drives faster. Skates on the edge of disaster. He's the risk master. He's on top of the world. At last they see it. Vision unfurled. Cash flow landslide. Now everyone wants a piece of his hide. Press wants him fried. Court wants him tried. Anyone this rich must have lied. Okay, back to Bollywood. Wait, this side. Okay, you got it. He is the risk master. Okay. Thank you very much, and I am happy for questions. Turns out this is an African elephant, and that was at 3000 Sandhill, or at 2882 Sandhill Road. And he ate a tree while I was riding him. Anyway, I'm open for questions, thoughts. We have 1 minute and 16 seconds.
All right. Thank you, Tim.
Anybody? Oh, Jay.
Thank you so much. That was really good. Guys, give another round of applause for Tim. That was just phenomenal.
Thank you.
All right. So maybe just one question, right? Because we have about a minute left. You're talking about the various cycles, and we've gone through the dot-com boom and the bust and the period of sanity. And now we're looking at $100 billion for Facebook, $1 billion for Instagram, 1.5 for Pinterest. are we in another bubble now? And we can turn the cameras off if you want to.
So according to the Draper Wave, we are nowhere near the top of the bubble. And as long as we're all talking about bubbles, we are not in a bubble. I think we've got 5 or 6 more good years. And I remember there were some early winners in 1996, 7, and 8 that looked very expensive at the time. And that was just the beginning of a really big rush. So if that's the case, and Facebook's the first one out, we got some good years ahead.
Wow, that's great. And the second question is, where did you learn these moves?
Okay, I'll tell you. It was last night, and my daughter said, "Oh, Bollywood dancing's easy. Screw in the light bulb, hand on the stomach, and hop."
All right. I think we have to end it at that note. I don't think we can get any better than that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. That's great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ty. Keep it up.